Surtur is everywhere as he's the new Season Pass card, and let's be honest, he's pretty good. I've been enjoying playing a Surtur deck, as it seems like a ton of people are. I mean, it's day one. I think I've seen like one Frigga deck, and everything else has pretty much been Surtur. It's a lot of fun, but here's some decks that either if you're free to play and didn't get the Season Pass, or you just want to counter Surtur decks because they're everywhere, here's some decks that I've brewed up that if you play this against a Surtur deck, you're making it pretty hard for them to get the synergies that they need for it to really take the benefit of what a Surtur deck is. Before I jump to the decks, thanks for everyone who's subscribed, who's new to the channel. If you're new and haven't subscribed, I'd appreciate if you subscribe as we're growing a new channel here. I appreciate all the new viewers. Let's get into the decks here. The first one is really an Affliction deck, mainly just focusing on decreasing their power and making it challenging for them to benefit from what Surtur is trying to do, with cards like Silver Sable and Scorpion, and then Grandmaster and Absorbing Man to hit those again type of thing. One obvious inclusion that I do not have is Cassandra Nova. I'm one of like 3 people who didn't play Deadpool's Diner, but she's an obvious inclusion in this as well. Sure, you could argue that there's a counter to that. They just play Luke Cage, but still they've now had to play a Luke Cage, and that messes out with their tempo, and they're less likely to get the cards they want out on curve, and so it's just messes up the synergy a little bit more. There's some other cards in here like Iceman and Baron Mordo that just make it hard for them to play their cards. A Surtur deck really relies being able to play cards consistently on curve. You need to get out your Surtur on 3, your 10 power on 4, your 10 power on 5, and then your Scar and another 10 power on 6. Like that is how the tempo goes. And if you made something cost more just even by 1, or in Baron Mordo's case a lot, it messes up that tempo and makes it hard for them to get the full benefit of Surtur. Obvious other inclusions is U.S. Agent. Throw this on whatever location their armor is on. They're most likely to play their Atuma there, and now you've afflicted that down to an 8 power. They're not going to benefit Surtur that way. They're also not going to benefit from Scar that way. Shang-Chi, obvious inclusion. Sandman, similar idea to Iceman and Baron Mordo. You're just making it hard for them to get the cards out that they want, especially into turn 6. Mobius and Mobius is also going to be huge, as Scar is the obvious synergy with Surtur, and you just negated that completely. And then, of course, because this deck has a lot of tech against it, but it also doesn't have a lot of winning power, which Shang-Chi is a lane winner in and of itself, but Leader and Magneto is a good winner. Leader to steal their power, obviously, that they're putting down, steal their Red Hulk or something, and Magneto not necessarily to win a lane, but to lose a lane intentionally by pulling cards there and help you win a lane with your smaller cards. So this one would genuinely be frustrating to play against, and you're just hoping to be able to flick them as much as possible with these kind of annoying cards. Editor Harrison here again. I don't know why I didn't think of this, but Ajax, if you've got him, I do not, would be an obvious inclusion in this deck and would be an incredible finisher, way better than something like Magneto. I'd take out Magneto for Ajax and leave Leader in there. Anyway, have fun. The next one is kind of based off that idea, because in this deck, actually I should say, there's some other cards that you could include in here, like Misery as a way to get off these on reveals at one more time. Zemo you could play, Gladiator you could play, but you run the risk of pulling down a 10 power for them with Gladiator. Hazmat you could play as well, that also affects their Scar ability if you're missing some cards. Valkyrie also would be an incredibly frustrating card to play against. I'll show you a deck that includes Valkyrie here in a second, but slapping all their 10 power cards down to 3, man, that is a lane winner right there, truly. So yeah, really frustrating deck to play against. The next one is kind of took that idea of Zemo and made it even worse, and that's just taking their cards and making it hard for them to play what they do have. So you have cards like Yondu and Cable and Baron Zemo and the White Queen to take their cards, in particular Baron, Cable, Yondu, preventing them from playing the card that you have taken. Grandmaster to do all those things again. Morph, they're probably going to have a pretty high-powered card in their hand, and you just took it. Again, Mobius and Mobius, he's just a super essential tech card with Scar being pretty much everywhere. Negasonic, blow up one of their 10 powers in a super frustrating way. And then Shang-Chi, obviously inclusion. And then because this deck I felt like did need a little bit of a stronger conclusion, of course, this is like a one winning solution only with Black Panther into Arnim Zola, but that can really build up 2 lanes for you pretty strongly. But also huge combo here, Goose and Mobius and Mobius. even if they have Zabu, there is no way they're getting any of their 10 power cards into this lane. The only one they can get in there is Surtur, so you wouldn't be able to Shang-Chi that one, but it makes all their 10 power cards line up into one location, and suddenly you can Shang-Chi that really, really easily, especially because with Mobius, there's no way that they're going to be able to get a card in there because Zabu can't discount him into the Goose lane. So pretty powerful combo there against the Surtur deck. Some cards that you could play in here as well, again, is all the other Affliction cards like Silver Sable. You could include, you could also go the route where you throw in cards like Korg and Rockslide and just frustrate their draw ability. You can also throw in cards here like Black Widow or Master Mold to prevent them from drawing and just make it difficult for them to get the hand that they need. Again, because the Surtur deck really relies on being able to play on curve. As soon as you prevent them from drawing the cards they need, it's really frustrating. The last one here is actually a C3 deck based on that Valkyrie. It's called R2D2 because I have a C3PO deck here. And this one's just a little bit more techy, so hopefully you get the joke there. But obviously just a lot of 3-powered cards, Valkyrie being a lane winner in and of itself on turn 6 if you don't have priority, which you're probably not going to against the Surtur deck because their cards are massive. It's super frustrating to have Valkyrie go in on turn 6 and just win a whole location. That's pretty amazing with Cerebro down. This deck originally had Magic. You could think about running Magic in here, but I felt like a Surtur deck is going to benefit more from turn 7 than you will, unless you go for like a Valkyrie into Shadow King on turn 7. Obviously do those in different lanes. That obviously would be huge, so it's a trade-off. Think about it for yourself. Other important cards, Mobius, he's an obviously inclusion just because he's such a good tech against Scar and She-Hulk, and he's at 3-power. Shang-Chi initially wasn't in this deck, but against Surtur, he's an obvious inclusion, and he's 3-power. Cosmo is huge, and then US Agent, again, same benefit as before. You're discounting their 10-power cards as soon as they play it in that location. If they play the card into that location and your US Agent is there, Surtur does not receive the buff. Also, let's say they already had their 10-power cards there and Surtur got the buff, and you drop this down, their Scar is now no longer as discounted as it would be. Why the Sentinel? That's an interesting inclusion. Well, it's because that I found that having a consistent amount of 2-drops is pretty important to maximize turn 4, 5, and 6, and potentially turn 7 if you go into that. With Magic, playing 2-drops on turn 4 or a 3-drop and a 2-drop on turn 5, right? The important part of this deck is getting cards down, and so you want to be able to play those consistently. And sometimes I ran a deck without Sentinel, and I just found myself playing a 1-3-drop on turn 5 just didn't feel very good. So that always gives you an option to play another Sentinel. Some cards that you could switch out if you don't have some of these into the C3 deck is pretty much any card that has 3 power. So I'm thinking cards like Colossus. Jeff is an obvious inclusion. He's a great card. Debris. Gambit is great, especially if you're destroying one of their 10-powered cards. But with armor on the board and not being able to aim Gambit, it's kind of a toss-up. Frigga is a new 3-cost. You could copy your US Agent, and that would be extremely frustrating to them. Juggernaut, he could be a lane winner in and of himself on turn 6. So Black Widow is another card, prevent them from being able to draw. That's pretty huge. So there's some examples of cards that you could include if you don't have all of these. So that's the C3 deck. The last one is just a bounce deck. Obviously, bounce is just in a really, really good place. It has been since Toxin and Agent Venom released. And the great news is that a Surtur deck doesn't tech against bounce deck the way that the meta might have been before. And then including cards like Silver Sable and Iceman are incredibly frustrating. You could even throw in a Scorpion and a Cassandra Nova and bounce those and also be really, really frustrating. But the typical techs against this, I have yet to see a Killmonger in a Surtur deck. There's not a lot of Cosmos in Surtur decks, those types of things. You're going to be able to play the cards that you want pretty easily and not worry about them being destroyed. And bounce is still just in such a good place that you can get pretty tall even when they're getting huge with 10-power cards. Additionally, because you're going to be able to predict where they're playing with Rocket Raccoon pretty easily. So there's my inclusion. Another card that you could include in here potentially, if you in any of these decks that you can include, not just this one, is really surprisingly, where is he? Where'd he go? Miles Morales. Really, really interesting addition. But here's what I found. A lot of people on a 6-turn game are playing Arrow on turn 5. A card moved last turn, and now you have a 6-cost card at 1 power for you to drop on turn 6. Obviously, do not include him in a C3 deck because you just negated all your benefit of Cerebro. Unless you play him in, you want to save up your Valkyrie and you've got Miles and Valkyrie and you play that on turn 6 and set him to 3 power. Make sure you don't have Luke Cage down. You could benefit from that. Having a 1-drop, but I don't know why you do that. I just play any other card that costs 1 and set it to Valkyrie. Like, that's such a weird condition. But all those other cards, you could put in Miles Morales in there because then, a 1-cost 6 power card is pretty good. Ultimately, the idea, whatever deck you run it is, if you're specifically trying to beat Surtur, is just to frustrate their synergies of prevent them from playing more cards, decreasing the power of their cards so they're not benefiting from Surtur, or just making it more challenging to play what they have. Surtur decks are pretty straightforward. You play a lot of 10 power cards. There's not a lot of maneuvering around that. And in any way you make that challenging, increasing their cost or decreasing their power, just completely wipes out the benefit of that deck. Yeah, sure, they're still dropping 10 or 8 powered cards down, just maybe not as frequently as they would have hoped. You're still going to be able to frustrate them enough to, with a Shang-Chi, eliminate whatever 10 powers they have and win a lane. So, pretty fun decks to brew up and go against a Surtur deck that if someone played these against me, which they might now because of this video, I would be infuriated in a Surtur deck. But that's how it goes. That's the state of Marvel Snap and the new meta. So yeah, hopefully these decks help you have some fun against Surtur and deal with the frustration of Ragnarok being brought about in Marvel Snap. So have some fun. If there's some decks that are really beneficial for you, or you play any one of these decks, let me know in the comments. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have fun.